Hi everybody, it's me Arden Lee, back with another video. And in today's video, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about the story of Cinderella, the fairy tale as we know it, and I want to talk about why it doesn't quite have the happy ending that we think it does, that it purports to have. And I'm not out here to cancel Cinderella. It's still a great story. I enjoy it quite a bit. I have quite an affinity for it, and I also don't think that it is an inherently unfeminist story. As I know that there are a lot of arguments out there that try to paint it that way. It actually has very feminist beginnings. Maybe I'll get to that at the end of the video if there's time. But what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about this conversation that I had with a friend of mine the other day. We were at Disneyland because I feel like I keep making all these videos where I'm like, all right, I got inspired because I went to Disneyland, and that's part of why I go to Disneyland, because it inspires me, that juxtaposition of reality versus non-reality and the intersection there. And and especially at this time of year, we are approaching summer when the Southern California Select Annual Passports, of which I'm an owner of one, are no longer valid because all the families are coming in for a vacation to Southern California to be able to go on their Disneyland trips for the summer. So I have to get my fix in before the blackout dates commence. So we were at Disneyland. We were having this conversation about which Disney princesses we would hang out with based on their personalities and how they deal with the world and their circumstances around them. And we were talking about Cinderella. And I said something to my friend. I said, I think Cinderella has a really kind heart. I think she's at heart a really good person, and I like her, but I have a little misgivings because I don't think she's really fully dealt with her trauma, and I'm not sure her relationship is going to work out, and I'm not sure, I don't know exactly how she's going to deal with that. And it ended up in this really long and interesting discussion where I sort of analyzed Cinderella's history in the story very much in the same way that I work with my one-on-one clients when we do their timeline analysis sessions. And I thought to myself, how cool would it be if I did a video where I made, hi Edgar, where I made that kind of work, ooh, no biting, thank you, where I made that kind of work transparent with a story that everyone knows. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. And if you're not yet familiar with me and my work, my name is Arden Lee. I am the creator of the Repatterning Project. It is an 8-week course where where we do exactly what I'm about to talk about, which is to go into our histories and examine our trauma imprints, our belief systems, the way that our human operating systems form our worldviews, our social conditioning, and we backwards engineer those things for the results that we want. And it's some of my knowledge in those fields that makes me, Edgar, why are you being so crazy? Why do you have so much energy, huh? Little kitten antics. So it's some of that knowledge that therefore, it's one of those things where, like, now that I do this work, I can't not see it everywhere, and it's fine because I love doing this work, and it's so fun and inspiring to me. So no complaints. But yeah, it's hard to look at a story like Cinderella and not have some some misgivings about the way that things are wrapped up in that story. So yeah, essentially, my issue with, it's not my issue with the story of Cinderella. It's my issue actually with the incompletion of the story of Cinderella. I really want to see, what happens after she's at the palace. I feel like Cinderella is really only like part 1 of the story. Like, I wish there were a part 2 so we could see her really reconcile her traumatic upbringing with the abundance that she's called in palace life. And there's a reason why I think that it's such a quick transition that she's not in alignment for it. So let's examine a little bit about what happens and what happens to her throughout her history and the kind of imprints that those events would end up forming with her, and through no fault of her own, because she's, she's a kind person and she seems to be a very smart person too. But this happens to the best of us, let me tell you. So, so I want to examine the kind of imprints that would be likely to happen. Oh my goodness. You got into your catnip mouse and you went mad. Come here. Oh, say hi to everybody, Edgar. I'm making a video right now. Can you be calm? Can you chill out a little bit? How about you sit here? So I want to look at that and just, the results that are likely to happen from the kind of trauma that she has, and the kind of work that that I would do with her if I could, if I could like insert myself as a character in that story as like the royal trauma vizier, and the sorcerer, the magician who lives in the palace and helps everyone work magic. Then I wish I could do that kind of work in that. That'd be wonderful in that kind of world. So I want to unpack that a little bit so that people can get a bit more of an understanding based on a tale that everybody knows and loves. So Cinderella starts out with two very loving parents. However, her mother dies early on when she is a child. So right there, right away, we're looking at. I'm looking back through a couple of different movie versions that I remember, and I think she's generally maybe like around 5 or 6 when her mother passes away, and naturally that's going to be traumatic. That's going to cause imprints of abandonment and loss. She is, as far as we know, heterosexual. At least we know she is certainly attracted to men. Whether she's queer also. That would be cool. I'd like to see a queer Cinderella, but at the very least, we know that she's attracted to men. So, so the death in that moment, the abandonment in that moment of her mother's death, that's a mother wound, which in her case, in her mostly heteronormative relationships, is going to show up as a wound more around the self, that she might identify with, and potentially less in her partners, because it's not coming from the man in her life who's her father. At that point. Yet still, this early experience of loss and the fact that, the impermanence of life and this feeling of I can't trust that my mother, I can't trust that the source of love is always going to be here for me. I'm always, worried that something is going to be taken away. That's going to be a pretty deep imprint early on. And then that is compounded by the fact that her father, who up until that point in the story, it seems like he really does, he's really in love with her mother, but he suffers the trauma of her mother's death as well. And his coping mechanism in response is, in his traumatized state, he seems to lose a great deal of his discernment, and he marries the wicked stepmother, who is clearly not in the picture for true love, to be there for Cinderella. She has an agenda where she is out for her own wealth and the wealth and status and inheritance of her daughters. Because naturally we have a patriarchal wound here happening in the fairy tale world where, we could also look at the trauma of the wicked stepmother, because for whatever reason she's a single mother at a time in like Cinderella had to be like what, the 15 or 1600s, I think, maybe, and given the it was just impossible for a woman to be a single mom at that point in history. So she's got trauma as well from her own, I don't know why her husband either passed away or I don't know what happened there, but whatever it is, her wounding from that abandonment and loss causes her to go after this man who is Cinderella's father as a source of support. Even when she is not really in love with him, and not there for the right reasons, where she's acting in survival mode because of the patriarchy. So Cinderella's father marries her, not being sensitive enough to sense that he's being used for economic status, and that this woman doesn't have the best interests of himself and his daughter at heart. And eventually, I believe her father dies as well, I think there. I'm trying to remember if there's like a version of the story where he comes back. At the very least, whether he's dead or whether he's just lost at sea or whatever, depending on what version of the story you're going by. She experiences this other abandonment wound. So now she's had both parents essentially abandon her, through no fault of their own, perhaps, but she's left with nothing but her wicked stepmother and the wicked stepsisters, and the relationships that she forms with the animals around her, which are really her only source of comfort. And even then, she's talking to mice and birds. She's developing relationships with animals that most people would consider vermin. I'm not going to judge that because I'm a big fan of connecting with animals in the spirit world, but it's not. It's really like if I only had Edgar as a source of emotional support, that wouldn't really bode well for me. I thank God for Edgar and that I had him, my cat. But really we need a lot more support to heal from these kind of things. And so there she is. And the abuse that she receives at their hands is just astronomical. She's immediately relegated to, to essentially a position of slavehood within the household, of absolute servitude at all points in time. And she's also mocked and she's ridiculed. And whatever she does, it's not good enough. Her stepmother is always giving her more and more tasks to do. Not only cleaning up the house and serving and waiting on them hand and foot, but it seems like in several versions of the story, there's actually some tasks that her stepmother gives her that are just cruel, that are just nonsensical. In the Into the Woods version, she's given a task of picking lentils out of the ashes, right? Her stepmother pours a bunch of lentils into the fireplace and says, if you can pick all the lentils out, then maybe you can go to the ball. And so it's not only is she being used and exploited, but she's really being mocked and ridiculed too. So it's not even like it's the cruelty in that household just compounds and compounds and compounds itself. So we're already dealing with a lot of abandonment triggers, and on top of that we have the damage that's done to her self-worth through the fact that she's being forced into this role of servitude, of perpetual servitude, and also mocked and ridiculed and left out of things. So we're looking at wounds around feeling unwelcome, wounds around feeling unworthy, wounds probably quite likely around being a people pleaser. I mean, Cinderella is one big walking fawn response because she's learning that her only value to her household, which is really her only source of safety, is in doing things for other people. So she's absolutely taking on people pleasing as well. And I don't want to underestimate her, her own magic and her own abilities to create her future, because naturally, she finds out about the ball and she's so excited about it, and it looks like, she's not going to have any chance of being able to go. And then naturally she figures out a way to conjure her fairy godmother, or if you want to call that her spirit guide, her guides, her ancestors, however you want to say that shows up in the story. She's able to manifest enough magic to be able to make it to the ball. And I think one of the things that I find really amazing about it is she actually does pretty well with blending in there in the time being, which I think is a testament to her spirit and to the fact that she does possess magic, and she does possess that in many ways, that inner nature that allows her to rise above, which is why I say I have hope for her, right? But she still needs to do the work. So that happens, and then but you notice as soon as the clock strikes midnight, and the gown is gonna turn back, the carriage is gonna turn back into a pumpkin, she's got to be home, she runs away because she has no idea that she could possibly be valued just as she is. it's almost like an Aladdin moment here, right? Aladdin has these same sort of self-worth issues of like, I have to be a prince in order to win over Princess Jasmine, so I'm gonna fake being a prince and not actually tell her my true nature. So there's kind of a common theme here. So she also, and it's understandable, you know, I mean, I'm sure if that happened to me, I would absolutely like, oh my God, 1 minute, like here I am at the ball and everything's fine. And then the next moment, like my dress is gone, you know, it's changed back into whatever rags I was wearing at the time. Yeah, of course I would run. I would be embarrassed too. Um, but really, it also, you know, it shows her level of comfort with her worthiness, that she's putting on this mask, this glamour facade. And when I say glamour, I don't mean just that she looks glamorous, but that it's magic, it's glamour, you know, in terms of creating an illusion that is only temporary. So so that happens, and then, you know, naturally we know what happens in the end. The prince goes about finding her because of the glass slipper, and she's like the last person in the kingdom, right? Everyone is trying to, like her stepmother and stepsisters are so adamant about her not being the one. I think they must even secretly know in some weird way, because they're so protective of not having the shoe, you know, her try on the shoe, right? They're trying to hide her places. So the prince really has to go to the edge of the kingdom to find her. And he does, and the shoe fits, and then it's like, oh, amazing, this is the girl I fell in love with, and that's it. Now we're married and happily ever after, right? And the reason that this gives me a lot of pause and concern is at this point, she's going straight from her abusive situation right into the abundance she's called in without doing any healing. So it's a quantum leap. And you guys know that I'm a really big fan of quantum leaps, but as you know, if you're doing, like, you know, I've been at this work for about 3 years now. It took me like 3 years to get from, you know, the kind of abusive relationships that I was living in to a place where I could really feel happy and healthy with myself and ready to call in that kind of abundance, and to really be ready for that true love, happy ending, that soulmate relationship. So for her to go immediately from one situation to another, we talk about this when you try and take your journey too fast. I've said this before. You can only go as fast as the speed of your alignment, right? Burnout is when you are moving faster than the speed of your alignment. If you're trying to get somewhere before you can align with what's happening on the inside and get used to it and be like, oh, it's kind of like when you get into a really hot bathtub or a jacuzzi, and you get like, you're like, oh my God, you're going into the hot tub and everyone's chilling out in the hot tub and they're fine, and you put your toe in and you're like, oh my God, that's so hot, I can't stand it. And you kind of have to acclimate your body to what that environment now feels like, right? You acclimate your body temperature in that regard. In the same way, when we're aligning ourselves with a new level of reality, we have to acclimate our bodies to getting used to it. Having, you know, this is why we talk about lottery winners who have no idea how to manage their money, and then, you know, a year or two later they're just broke all over again, right? Because they're not in the state where they know how to have that kind of money. And similarly, people who have intense trauma that they have not dealt with don't necessarily know how to handle that relationship that is that true love relationship, right? I also doubt some of the prince's social conditioning, which I'll get to in a second. But there she is with this man she's only met once, and he's the one who's, you know, saving her from this abusive relationship. But at the same time, you know, she really doesn't know him well. There's not that sense of emotional intimacy. And for her to be in a real relationship of equals, I mean, she's stepping into a royal family when what she's known her entire life is abuse. That's a really big switch for someone to make. And I think she's running too much of an energetic current, and she's going to burn out. She's going to snap, or she's not going to understand how to behave in the palace. It's going to be really hard for her to receive, right? Because if you've been conditioned your entire life to believe that you are only worth the servitude that you offer others, and that you're, deserving of ridicule or mockery, even if you retain that sense of self. I grew up with abuse, and I knew on some level I was like, this isn't about me. This is actually like not what I deserve. I have an idea of my self-worth, but that belief in itself actually kept me out of my healing for a long time, because I thought that just because I understood intellectually that, I was like, yeah, I'm smart, I'm attractive, whatever, I've dealt with that, I know that had nothing to do with me. It actually prevented me from seeing all the places where my trauma had imprinted on me that I wasn't dealing with, that were happening on an unconscious level. So there's no way, even if she's super smart, and even if she's, has that magic within her and that spiritual guidance, there's just no way she can make that leap that quickly and be open to receiving that kind of abundance. Could you imagine her, like, sitting there at the dinner table in the royal palace? Like, she's probably gonna, just out of muscle memory, she's gonna like try and clean up after people, even though she's now a princess by marriage. It's gonna be awkward, and in many ways, the royal family, one hopes that they're going to see her heart and really love her and respect her. But when you're dealing with a monarchy, and which is so based in appearances, there's going to be a lot of judgment about whether she fits in, which is, only going to replicate the trauma of her self-worth being essentially undermined when she was young. She's going to still worry that, like, oh, I don't belong, I'm not worthy, I'm still cleaning up after people, and now I'm doing like the wrong thing. I'm doing the other wrong thing now, and still, like, I don't belong, I don't fit in. Where am I ever going to feel like I'm actually like at home and loved? Like I did with my parents when I was like, up until I was about 5 or 6 years old. I'm still kind of grasping for the ability to go back to that. And the prince, on the other hand, the prince has a good heart, and one of the things that my friend, while we were at Disneyland, pointed out, and she said, the prince really loves her. Like, he goes to the ends of the kingdom to find her. Like, I think his heart is really in it. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but look at all the social conditioning that he's received. He's a prince. He's part of a monarchy. Do you think there's ever been a time when he didn't get what he wanted, right? I think that's part of the reason that he pursues her so hard, is because she's the one thing that he can't have. He has a whole kingdom, and he's used to getting his way all the time. I doubt that his parents ever denied him anything, and so he goes after, like, good for him for not being in victim consciousness about it, and in a way he's stepping up into his masculine and saying, like, I claim this is what I want, I'm going to pursue it, I'm going to find this woman, and I'm going to really take a stand for the love that I want. But there's also a degree of entitlement there. There's a degree of entitlement, and also, like, well, when I find her, then she'll just be my true love, and she'll be my queen. And I know this already, even after having just met her, like, one time, which is a little naive on the prince's part. So we have to really look at the ways that he was spoiled by his parents growing up. And so what that means, when you have those two kinds of people together and they get into a relationship, especially when there's so much societal pressure on the outside for them to maintain good appearances, what's going to happen is the prince is going to insist on his way all the time, and Cinderella is not going to be able to assert her own needs and personal boundaries, because she hasn't been able to do that since she was 5 years old. She has not been able to even state a desire without getting ridiculed for it. She can't even say, like, hey, I think I might want to go to the ball, without being made to feel that that's a ridiculous notion that she's not worthy of. So if you have these two people stepping into this relationship together, it's automatically a recipe for disaster. So if I were working with Cinderella, I would pick several of those moments to go back and do the modality that we use in the repatterning project with the VIP students who choose the one-on-one work, or with my private clients who choose to work one-on-one with me even outside the course. I use timeline therapy to go back in and really address those deep-rooted memories that made those imprints, and go back and through visualization, light trance, hypnosis, to repattern them and change them so that they sit differently in your body, which is, that's a process that I'm not going to explain at like 24 minutes into the video. but But what I would do is I would go back. Normally we do our timeline analysis. We look at everything, all the formative events that have happened in someone's life between ages 0 and 18. And then we go back and we pick 3 of them. If you're doing the repatterning project and you get the VIP upgrade option, then you get those 4 sessions with me. You get the 1 timeline analysis session. And you also get 3 timeline therapy sessions where we pick 3 of the most impactful moments. And we go back and we repattern them. So I would probably choose her mother's death. I would choose something around her father and the abandonment wound, whether it's the wedding to the stepmother, the time that she realizes that he's not coming back, whatever that is. I'd probably I'd work with her and I'd figure out which one had the most impact for her. And the third one I would probably choose is the ridicule around going to the ball. Actually, if I did 2 moments with the father, that might be better. The wedding, and then, the moment she realizes he's not going to come back, that might actually be more of an inner layer. The ridicule around going to the ball seems like, even though it's an important plot point, it might not actually be the most impactful in terms of her trauma imprints, because that kind of mockery and ridicule has been going on already. So maybe I take that back. Anyway, I would want to have a lot of hope for her future with the prince, but the prince also is going to have to undo a lot of his own social conditioning in order to really make that relationship work. Because ultimately, Cinderella is going to have her own needs and her own boundaries, and he's going to have to respect that. I am a little wary of a prince who is so intrigued by this one thing that he can't have that he pursues it, right? There's really an entitlement thing going on there. Why her and not any of the other women at the ball who are, super available to him or whatever, who are maybe even closer to his level? Does he sense, in the way that so many manipulators do, does he sense when someone is vulnerable and is going to be an easy target for him to manipulate? Maybe, right? Sounds like it anyway. So that's why I think that Cinderella is really not the happy ending that we all think that it is. And I would totally hang out with Cinderella in terms of, which Disney princesses would I hang out with. But as I said, I would be a little wary about the degree of her trauma healing. And, if this were the realm of the imagination, I would love to be the royal marriage counselor, because I think I could probably do a lot of good in that relationship if both of them were willing to work on it. Yeah. In the meantime, however, since that's not real, I'm happy to help those of you who are watching. Check out the repatterning project. We are enrolling now for June 30th. And I'd love to also, for those of you who really feel called to do that really super deep work, working one-on-one with me, going back in, doing that full timeline analysis, and having basically my brain do what I just did with the Cinderella story, being able to do that with you in your history, and really looking back at those formative moments where if we repattern them, we get to change your whole outlook on what you're able to call in for yourself, what you're able to receive, and how you cope with it in the moment. So if that sounds like something that you are into, reach out to me and let's do that, because it's too late for me to work on Cinderella, but there's plenty other people in the world who definitely could benefit from my help. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.